Located in northern Minnesota along the Canadian border is the Boundary Waters Canoe Wilderness. And you want to talk about some of the extreme fishing? The Boundary Waters Canoe Wilderness is pretty extreme. The Boundary Waters, or the BWCA, is a 1 million acre federally designated wilderness preserve set aside for non-motorized activities. That means you can only hike or paddle through the Boundary Waters. All it is water and trees as far as you can see. This pristine watershed is both beautiful and serene, and seriously, do not sleep on the fishing. About a year ago, my daughter, who's now 17, she asked me if I would take her into the Boundary Waters. So I contacted a friend of mine who owns Williamson Hall Outfitter in Ely, and we set up this trip. When we got to the Outfitters, first they fed us this huge breakfast in their dining room. Then they went through gear, equipment, food. Along with Addison and Brock, I also had my youngest son Chase with me, and my good friend Steve and his son Felix. And with a couple of newbies on this trip, Chase and Felix were quite interested in the gear and all the food that the outfitter was showing us for our trip as he had it set up. After we finished with gear, Blaine gave us a very thorough mapping session where he covered the campsites he thought would be best, some tips for portages, and of course, marked several fishing spots he suggested we try. After that, we loaded up and took off. First, we had to go down Moose Lake, but we cheated. We didn't want to paddle the extra 7 or 8 miles, so we paid the outfitter to take us down in a towboat all the way down to the portage at Birch Lake. In less than 30 minutes, we covered Moose Lake, Sucker Lake, and soon found ourselves at the portage headed into Birch Lake. So like I mentioned earlier, the Boundary Waters is a collection of over 1,000 lakes. They're basically connected by short trails. Well, some aren't so short, but they're all connected by portage trails. And what you do is you get to the end of one lake and you get all your gear out of your canoe and you carry it to the next lake. And yes, you even carry your canoe. And when you get to the end of the portage trail, and you put your canoe back in the water, you put your gear back in the canoe, and you paddle to the end of that lake or wherever you're going. You just keep repeating this process of paddling, portaging, until you get to where you want to set up camp. Part man, part pack mule. And so, for 17 miles, we paddled and we portaged. Even though we were super tired after 7.5 hours of paddling and portaging, the loons were still out, the water looked beautiful, the fish calling. We had heard that this area of Knife Lake was really good for smallmouth bass fishing, so we went out to try to find us some smallmouths. The water there in Knife Lake was crystal clear. We were estimating we could see about 25 feet into the water. This made fishing a little bit difficult. We had to slow down our approach. We went to just a very basic, simple setup. We'd cast down into the rocky boulder piles and just wait and watch for one of the smallmouths to come out of the boulders to crush our hooks. Once we had the pattern figured out, we were able to go out and catch several smallmouth that evening. I think it's another smallmouth. Not as big as the last one. These little soft plastic crayfish, crushing it in here. Soon the sun was setting. We were still very tired from the day's paddling, so after watching the sunset, we went back to camp, sat around the fire for a while, and went to sleep. The next morning was beautiful. Clear skies, no wind, just perfect mirrored reflection of the lake. What a stunning view. While I was waiting for everyone else to wake up, I just stood there on the shoreline, appreciating the beauty of the wilderness. After a very lazy morning of skipping rocks and swimming and a much-needed nap in the hammock, we finally got out fishing a little bit after lunch. Spent the afternoon paddling to a spot we'd want to try, and there we started fishing. In my canoe, I had my youngest son, Chase. He was running the video for a lot of this. And in front of the boat, I had my daughter, Addison. All right. There you go, it's another smallmouth. It's about the 6th smallmouth I caught. This one's just on a leech. Some of them caught soft plastics. Just back here in a beautiful little bay. At this point, I decided to focus on trying to help my daughter catch a fish. In some ways, fishing out of a canoe is more difficult than fishing out of a motorboat. Not only do you not have a trolling motor to move around, but you also cannot give it the big hook set because you're always worried about tipping the canoe.
Stupid fish.
Stupid fish, she says. Not only did Addie struggle with fish getting off, she also managed to catch a few weeds and several sticks. But she persevered, and towards the end of the evening, she started catching fish.
Smallmouth.
Oh, it counts. Okay, turn and look at me. Like, shift it a little bit so we can.
Tiny. It's tiny.
Once the sun went down, I put on a topwater lure and started casting. Okay, a little bit on topwater now. That one's on the whopper plopper. Caught him on the leech, caught him on the Senko, caught him on a plastic crawdad. Now we're catching him on topwater. There we go. That is awesome. Oh, it's barely hooked too.
I think that's a largemouth.
I think it's a smallmouth again.
Well, it's not in the boat yet.
Look at that. Another one on topwater. That topwater bite is really starting to pick up. There we go. After watching another beautiful sunset and catching a bunch of fish, we headed back to camp, sat around the campfire, and went to bed. The next morning, we were greeted with another beautiful sunrise, and my friend Steve and I decided to go out. You know, I had caught a bunch of fish, and overall was relatively pleased with the fishing, but when you go that far and paddle and work that hard to get somewhere as remote as Knife Lake, you really want to catch something big. Even though I'd caught dozens of smallmouth, I knew there had to be a big one out there somewhere. I just kept paddling and casting, and the crazy thing was, the strike came when the rod was laying in my lap. I'm going to show you in a second. It's a nice one. Whoa. Which one? Too small, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, it's a big one. Oh, my goodness. After finally landing a big smallmouth, I turned my attention to Steve, and we paddled around, helping him find some fish, and he caught several more that morning as well.
It was really nice of me to...
That was a nice one. Oh, it is a good one.
I thought I was going to have a problem not having a net, but it's been working out okay.
Good one. Oh yeah, nice one.
Definitely the best of my trip here. Hey, come
on. Well done. After we finished up fishing that morning, Steve and I paddled back to camp, and it was time to do the sad part. We had to break down camp and head back to the real world. Along the way, we were able to paddle by several loons. Just really beautiful day, kind of sad and melancholy to be leaving, but we had a really great time. We did stop at Thunder Point Lookout and hike to the top for the view of the lakes. Along the way, Brock was dragging a spoon, and he wanted to prove to everybody that you can catch really small fish on really big spoons, I guess. We paddled all the way across Knife Lake and made camp right by the portage so we could get out early the next morning. The kids enjoyed another day of swimming and sitting by the lake and a lot of skipping rocks. That last night, sitting there on the campfire with everybody, my heart was just filled with gratitude for the opportunity to spend time with these wonderful people, friends and family, for the wilderness, for Williams Hall Outfitters, for Blaine, Charlene, and Dave for helping us out, and mostly to my wife who stayed home to keep the business going, allowing me to go and spend time with the kids. What a great opportunity it was to go fishing and camping in the Boundary Waters. If you're watching this video and you're thinking, wow, that's something I'd like to do, I encourage you, take time, take a break from work, grab someone you love, get out in the wilderness, go somewhere, get your line wet, catch some fish, camp, sleep under the stars, take a moment to unplug,